Good morning, good day, and good evening. Welcome to episode 183 of Tech of a Tea. I'm, as always, your host, Brody Robertson, and today we have a guest who you may have never heard speak before, but if you're involved at all in the world of Linux gaming, whether that's on the Steam Deck, whether that's on, just your regular Linux desktop, you probably heard of the work that he's done. Welcome to the show, Glorious Eggroll. How you doing?
Hey, what's going on?
It is a pleasure to finally speak to you. I've been using, most people, they'll recommend, Proton GE anytime there is, any slight problem with the game, just to try it out to see if maybe it's going to deal with the problem. So I've definitely, I've certainly used what you've been doing for a while, but for anyone who maybe hasn't tried Linux gaming, or maybe is a bit confused about what Proton GE actually is, just give a brief explanation about what you do, what it is.
Okay. Well, it's in a nutshell, the easiest way that I can explain it is a fork of Steam's upstream Proton Experimental Bleeding Edge. And what we do on top of that is we add staging patches. So if you're familiar with Wine and Wine staging, you know that staging is a separate patch set. We've gone through all of those patches and figured out pretty much which ones are already applied in Proton or which ones aren't needed, because standard wine and wine staging are for games and applications. Some of those patches are not meant specifically for gaming. So we've pruned those out, brought in the extra staging patches that we think are helpful. We've also added in FFmpeg codecs that Valve themselves can't ship. Because as an individual, I am not representing any kind of company. I'm an end user just like everybody else, and we want our videos to work in our video games. So that's what we added on top of that, and it helps quite a bit, because another thing that we do is we add different game patches or tweaks or things that may not necessarily be immediately able to be added to Proton, but might need some testing or something like that. Or somebody says, hey, I have this quick hack that works for this specific game. We can add it, we can test it. And then I've communicated many years now with a lot of the people involved with Proton, and it's been super helpful to have patches that I'm able to throw in, test with a big community now, which is really great. I'm super thankful for my community, and then give that feedback to those devs that are involved with Proton, and it helps. It helps both. I get people coming in, we get games working, and then we shoot it upstream if we can, and that's how it works in a nutshell.
So, what's a good example of something that came from your project and that eventually got upstreamed for just maybe not a popular game, maybe just some random game? It just comes to mind. What's something that wasn't in the upstream project that sort of became possible because of what you were doing, what you were trying to add?
There's been a lot of things over the years. Most of the time now, I'll start with most of the time now. Usually what happens is there's a fix that comes in through DXVK or VKD3D, or even some Steam specific fix that somebody has for a pending merge request. And I'll take that fix, put it in Proton GE, ship it, and then we'll get feedback on it, and people will be like, oh, this works great, or oh, this broke this game or that game. And then that way I give that feedback back, and then they can either fix whatever is wrong with the patch or get it upstream if they need to. That's how things work now. Before, it was mostly I would dig through a lot of the wine bugs, a lot of the Warframe stuff, way back early in the day. This is a perfect example. So Warframe, it had DXVK problems. It had audio problems with the 64-bit version of Xaudio. And Warframe was literally what got me into this in the first place. Because before I did Proton GE, I managed a Warframe launching script where it and it did that was way back when, before DXVK even existed.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So what happened there is DXVK comes out, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome, because at that time Warframe only worked with OpenGL, and it had some problems on NVIDIA cards with rendering things, and then it also had some different problems on the AMD side. So, and this was all through OpenGL, and I was like, well, we could either fuss over OpenGL, it's been this way for years, or I can reach out to this DXVK dev and say, hey, do you mind checking and see if you can get Warframe working with DXVK? That'd be really cool. It's got all these current issues. And that's kind of what got my foot in the door to communicating regularly with Philip, the DXVK dev. And then, it went from there. But that was one of the main things. Like we got DXVK working with his help. Then the same thing happened with F Audio, although I currently don't have communication with the F Audio dev, but that's the same thing happened with F Audio. I reported the bugs, they got it fixed, and now F Audio, it used to be its own component, but now it's built into Wine. So fun stuff there. But that's just one minor example. Something that I contributed. What was it? There's been quite a few of the Valve build components or Valve runtime. What's it called? It was one of the starts with a B. I can't remember the name of it from the top of my head. But anyway, it was a component that was missing from the build environment that they needed. And I managed to fix that, as well as, once I fixed it, I said, hey, this is just a little small tweak, but I fixed it, submitted it, got it upstreamed. Same thing happened with GST Orc, which is for GStreamer, that we found out that gives a big performance boost. And we were using that in Proton GE before we got it upstream. So that was another one that was really useful. But just small things here and there. And then, they all add up, which is really, really helpful, especially over the years now.
Well, as you have, if you look at something like Proton DB, for example, you look at, different archives of it over the years, you just see tiny little changes would make massive amounts of game just all of a sudden start working. And nowadays, most things are pretty much fine. There is a couple of examples here, especially now that we have the Steam Deck. There's a couple of examples here and there, obviously Destiny's a big one. Any of the malware written by Riot, that's all a problem. You're not going to be able to deal with their rootkit unless they decide to make it work. But when it comes to things just on Steam, with the exception of developers who are very, very much for some reason just deciding not to make it work, most things are good. I know a recent example that was a problem was Catherine. For some reason, and also
I think Catherine is it still broken?
I think it's bronze now. I think it's a bit flat. It's some versions.
I'll have to go double check because that brings me to another side point. It was Media Foundation has been a huge ongoing pain point for many years, and it's gotten a lot better now. For all the games that play videos.
So Media Foundation provides what?
That's the Windows Media Foundation is it's provided in Windows 10 and higher, and it is basically the Windows specific codec package that allows a lot of the games to play videos. Borderlands 3, all of the videos for Borderlands 3, there were a big one that had Media Foundation work that needed to be done. A lot of the Unreal games, many of them have Media Foundation work that needed to be done to work correctly. There was another game that came out not too long ago. I can't remember the name of it, but I had literally a list of specific Media Foundation games, and we had a whole patch set. And every time we would make changes to that patch set, it was the guy who did the original patch set was Derek Lachaud, and I would work with him back and forth nonstop to get them to the point where I swear I must have annoyed the guy to hell. But we did. We got a lot of it ironed out. A lot of it was working, and now it's in really good shape. But it wouldn't be where it is today if not for all the testing that we did.
Right. And
that's why when you said Catherine, it clicked in my head. I was like, oh, that's one of the games that was on the list.
I know that when Persona 5 Royal came out, that was also a problem because of the anti-cheat system. That was Elden Ring's anti-cheat. What was Persona 5 Royal?
No, I know that didn't work.
No, that was DRM. That was a DRM issue, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Which made testing, watching the GitHub thread of people testing it and then getting banned from the game because of the DRM system. That was, it's such a it was breaking every time people change Proton versions. So if they wanted to try a patch, that would be changing a Proton version and would count as like a new system it was trying to launch on.
Was it using Denuvo? I don't remember.
I think
know
it was
Denuvo
Denuvo, yeah.
Yeah, Denuvo, I've hit that with so many games with Denuvo, and it's pissed me off so much every single time. Doom and Doom Eternal specifically with Doom Eternal.
Okay.
When that came out, it had a lot of patches and changes that it needed constantly in order to get working properly. And I would hit that stupid Denuvo DRM block at least 2 or 3 times a week, because you block, wait 24 hours, block, wait another 24 hours. And I'm just like, what am I supposed to do? I own the game, but right. Here's something funky that I did for testing. I had a copy, we'll just say that, and I sim-linked the legit game folder to the copy folder just so that I could test it without the DRM.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was fun. Thank you, Denuvo.
It's kind of interesting you mentioned Doom and Doom Eternal, because when the Steam Deck was coming out, Valve was using that as like one of their poster child games. Like, this is a game that works incredibly well on the Steam Deck. So it's weird that it was such a problem when it came out.
It came out before the Steam Deck.
Yeah.
Doom Eternal came out before the Steam Deck. That's why I'm saying, like, we had to get this stuff ironed out before Steam Deck was even out. Once Steam Deck was out, a lot of the hard to fix stuff was pretty much in good shape, which is, I'm thankful, because had it released like a year or two earlier, I think it would have been a mess. So I'm glad that Valve really just took their time with the Steam Deck and getting all the major stuff ironed out.
Do you find, like, obviously I can look at the list and see like what games are working, but do you find a lot less people sort of complaining about there being problems with newer games now that we do have the Steam Deck here, or is it sort of about the same?
No, not really. I would say it's really no different than a Windows release for some modern titles. Okay. Like typically with Windows, a new title comes out, and you probably have like an NVIDIA driver update or an AMD driver update that you need specifically for the game, either to fix something or run something. Same thing goes with Linux. But these days, like Ratchet and Clank was one. Doom Eternal was obviously one when it came out. But most, Last of Us. Oh my God. Yeah, don't get me started on that one either. But most, I would say, especially with the later DX12 titles, if it's a brand new game, give it maybe a week or two, and it should get most of the major. If there's problems with it running, give it a week or two, and it'll probably have most of those initial launch bugs fixed.
What I do find really interesting, though, is we are like seeing big titles like Baldur's Gate, for example. Like, I believe that was verified the day it came out. Like, there are titles like this that are coming out where developers are explicitly, like, there's no shot they weren't having discussions with Valve about getting it verified beforehand. Like, if it's going to be verified day one, like, they're obviously doing that. So it is really cool that we are starting to see some developers actually taking that initiative to try and get it working on this platform. And I don't know, like, I didn't think we would ever get to this point considering the market share that we have with Linux, but for some reason, even though the Steam Deck isn't like, it's not a Nintendo Switch in sales or anything like that, it still has had this really sort of widespread effect on the Linux gaming space.
Yeah, I want to go back on the Baldur's Gate 3 thing. One thing that I think kind of helps with that is when games offer like early access.
Right.
Because Baldur's Gate 3, even though it released now, it's been in early access for forever, and that really, really helped. When it first came out, it did have problems. I think I probably still have a Proton fix in there for when it was originally. It had some stuff that needed to be done, and once, like, the launcher didn't even work at first, and now all of that stuff works, and it's because they had that early access and we were able to get those things ironed out before the game even released. So That helps. I know some people are for or against early access games, or I'm not going to name any specific games because there's tons that are like, oh, early access for eternity.
Well,
but
Minecraft's a really good example of that. Like, that's a really
Yeah.
uncontroversial one. Like that, the alpha came out. I don't know. I don't know when the alpha came out, and then it was in beta for like 10 years, and now like the full release is out, and it's still technically like, you could call it like they're still adding content patches. So like,
we can't even bring this up without bringing up Star Citizen. Let's be honest here. Like,
is Star Citizen a game yet? Last I heard, it was like
no, it's still
it was a model viewer.
Not a game yet.
What? When did Star Citizen get announced? When was that?
Oh, it's been years, man.
Wikipedia. Let's see. A successful Kickstarter. Wait, pre-production of the game began in 2010. Production 2011. Crowdfunding 2012.
Yeah, it's been a solid 10 years at least.
Yeah, maybe it'll come out at some point. I don't believe it, but maybe. Honestly, I think we'll get GTA 6 or Elder Scrolls 6 before that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if GTA 6 is just not even like... There's not. Just
I
not
mean,
even
we got Diablo 4 finally.
Yeah, but I feel like that one should have been... They should have left that one cooking a little bit longer.
Oh, well, yeah,
Just,
of course.
yeah.
I mean... Well, let's be honest. How long did it cook already?
That's fair. No, what they should have done is let people play more than the first section of the game. Because the same thing happened with Diablo 3.
Yeah.
The first section was great because that's the part that got tested.
Yeah. They also I think they should have just skipped Diablo Immortal, but that's me in my opinion.
But don't you guys have phones?
Yeah.
Oh man, it's so sad, like, when you have a company like Blizzard who just, over the years, obviously there's the Blizzard saga, but like the games themselves, like, it's so sad when a company that is so beloved for the games they make just slow. It's not even like an instant collapse. Like, it's like one game comes out and then like sudden terrible game. Like, it's a slow decline into just mediocrity.
Yeah, man. It really, the whole thing with Overwatch 2 really disappoints me because, I mean, we all know there's a lot of problems with Overwatch 2, but they really haven't had a venue to, people that own the game haven't really had a venue to express their disappointment. So then when they announced, it's going to be on Steam, immediately it was just like Steam reviews, womp. And that sucks. But at the same time, it sucks for that company. But at the same time, it kind of paints a bad picture for future releases, because it's like, I would love to see Diablo 4 or World of Warcraft or even StarCraft,
They didn't have to do... See, the problem with StarCraft is they didn't kill StarCraft. They just didn't do anything with it.
They just... Yeah.
People that play StarCraft still, they love StarCraft. The problem is that nobody else cares the game exists.
Yep. And but that's the thing, is like, regardless, if you are a person who likes those games, who plays those games, even if you're in there for solo campaigns, I would like to see them on Steam. And if if that company on their side, they see, we put this game on Steam and it just got bombed, that kind of makes... If I were on that side, I'd be like, do we really want to do this with our other games? It sucks to have that point of view, but from a business standpoint, that's what I would see.
Well, the theory that I heard, like, obviously nothing's confirmed about why they did it, but the theory that I heard that does sound kind of compelling is that it's sort of a peace offering to the regulators who are trying to stop the merger happening, who just really, like... It's sort of like, okay, we'll give you this. See, we are going to work with these other companies. We're not trying to take everything under the wing of Microsoft. Like that could just be complete nonsense, but it does, with everything that's happening, it does seem to hold at least a little bit of weight. Like, if we seem like we're working with other people, then you're going to be less likely to try to stop the merger.
It's like, how can we do this? Let's give them our crappiest game in the lineup right now.
Honestly, I'm surprised they just didn't do Diablo Immortal. Just like,
surprisingly, I know some people who play Diablo Immortal, and besides for me personally thinking it's just a cash grab, like it's a legit game, and at this point, it's probably better than Overwatch 2.
Certainly more players, that's for sure.
Oh man.
My favorite thing with Overwatch 2 is have you seen Holocure, the game, the like Vampire Survivors like game just came out on Steam?
It's I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, so it's based on like the Hololive VTuber characters. It's a fan game, like made by originally made by one dude. There's like a couple of other people that work on the game now, but it had double the player base of Overwatch 2.
Oh jeez.
There was like 30,000 people playing it, so it's like not the biggest game of all time. It's not Baldur's Gate level, but like double what Overwatch 2 had.
Oh man, that's rough.
It is a little rough. So, one of the things that someone asked me, we're going to go back to the whole Proton thing. One of the things someone asked me on Twitter was, why does Proton GE need to be like its own separate thing? Like, obviously you touched on this a bit, but why isn't everything that you're doing something that's suitable to be upstreamed?
Well, I think there's two purposes that it serves. One, immediately we'll go to the FFmpeg codec stuff. There is simply just stuff in there that Valve can't ship. They have their own specific version of Proton that comes with Steam, with specific codecs that they can only ship in that version. They can't enable extra codecs for that. And they're trying to work with that. They've got their media recoder. It doesn't work for everything, but they're slowly but surely trying to put things through that. But for those other games, they simply need those codecs from FFmpeg that Valve can't provide.
Right.
That is one major reason that a lot of people started using the Proton GE builds. Another one is the FSR patches. So a lot of people, now we know GameScope has FSR built into it. You can use it that way. But some people don't like using GameScope because it occasionally introduces input lag. Maybe that's just one example. Or maybe it doesn't it doesn't work with their monitors correctly for whatever reason. There's another example. Or it's not capturing their mouse for whatever desktop environment they're using. That's another example. For those reasons, they might want to use FSR directly in the game. Or, for newer games, that's fine. They have, DLSS or XLSS or FSR built into the game. But for older games and people running on lower end hardware, they may still want to use FSR for that benefit. And we've removed it twice now because we keep getting into this point where it's like a Proton update comes out for the year, like the new yearly Proton comes out, and then we're like, well, crap, how are we going to rebase these? Because the original author of those, he put them out for Proton first as a PR or a merge request, and then moved his work over to GameScope. So the Proton, those patches for Wine or Proton are no longer getting updates from him at all. We fully rely on like the community to help with those updates, and we've got a guy who thankfully has updated it for us these last 2 years. I'm super, super thankful for him. He knows who he is. But yeah, those are just a few examples of what sets apart Proton GE from Proton Experimental. And on top of that, having all those little quirky test patches that get specific games working here and there, like they could put them in Proton Experimental, but then like everybody that's running Proton Experimental, even on the Steam Deck, they're gonna be like, hey, suddenly half my games broke because you exploited this hack. You can't do that on devices that you're selling to people. So you have to, it's nice to have some other venue or some other outlet where they can unofficially do that, And I'm not, I am not saying, I'm not contracted by Valve. I don't work directly with them or anything like that. I feel like it serves that purpose very well. So
I think that's something very clear that needs to be said as well. I had a bunch of people like who got really confused about your relationship with Valve. Like they were asking it like about stuff that only Valve internally would know. It's like, is Steam ever gonna make it so you don't need to use X Wayland on Wayland to get games running? Like, so explain,
Guys,
yeah.
I'm an end user just like everybody else. I work for Red Hat, which is a completely separate company. The stuff I do at Red Hat is completely separate from any of my projects or anything that I do on a daily basis. Anything that happens with Red Hat stays with Red Hat. I don't mess with it. I don't discuss it. That's all on its own special thing.
Right.
The same thing goes for Valve. I am just an end user. I don't have anything, no inside information, anything like that. The most I ever do is talk to the devs on a daily basis through Discord, like I have been for many years, and that's it. Like,
so you just have contacts within Valve, and that's about as far as it goes.
That's about as far as it goes. Yeah, and most of the time, if I have some kind of special patch or something, it's something that either has already been put out there for regular wine, or it's by another community member between that Proton Discord or my wine or my own Discord, or it's something that one of the devs is like, oh, I've been working. This used to happen, doesn't happen a lot anymore. Most of the time nowadays, anything they're working on usually just goes straight through Proton Experimental. But for example, through the Media Foundation stuff early on, we did a lot of that testing. I would go back and forth with Derek for the Media Foundation stuff. Apart from that, most of it's just day-to-day me being an end user and trying to get the new out there as fast as I can.
How much time do you reckon you spend trying to get things just how much time do you spend working on G? Obviously you have Nobara as well as like a separate thing, but just on G itself.
A lot less these days than I used to. I used to, and it was I'd work on it every couple of days and just constantly pulling stuff in, constantly rebasing stuff. And that was part of the reason that with Proton, when Proton 7 came out, we rebased the entire thing because we were originally doing it the same way that TKG does, which was take wine, put the Proton patches on top of wine, put the staging patches on top of that, and then put our custom stuff on top of that. But now we just rebase off of, we use Proton wine and then just rebase staging off of Proton wine, which is a lot easier because that way you'd only have to rebase the staging patches once a year.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like, I mean, occasionally you'll have a Proton change that comes in and you'll have to change maybe like one or two patches in staging. That happens. And I've got a list of customized versions of the staging patch, and then when a new Proton version hits, that's when we have to go through and we'll have to do another rebase again. But again, we only have to do that once a year now, as opposed to every time a new Proton version drops and breaks something.
Okay, so wait, can you explain how the Proton release cycle works from your side then? Because I wasn't aware of any of that stuff.
Okay, so typically what I do is I'll release a Proton version maybe like every 2 weeks.
Right.
And the reason I do that is mainly just to keep up with Proton Experimental. If there's a new patch or like an emergency fix or something that fixes a game that isn't launching, for example, like Ratchet and Clank. If that one, I had a little bit of work that I needed to do, but it was working on Steam Deck out of the box. But there was here's an example for that. On the NVIDIA side, there is a workaround for the direct storage problem. And they can't exactly put that in upstream because of some complications with it. But it's fine for me to use it in Proton GE. It allows NVIDIA users to play the game. So that was something that I want. Once it immediately came out, I was like, oh, we got to get this in Proton GE so people on NVIDIA can play the game. And being able to just get those things out on a as fast as I can basis is really nice. Don't get me wrong, Proton Experimental, they shovel their own stuff out as quick as they can. Sometimes a lot faster than I can. But with those little like hacks and quirks and things, again, that's stuff that only I can do. Sure.
So I'm assuming that for the games that you have someone tell you like, oh, this caused a problem, whatever. You probably have to buy a bunch of games, right? How big is your Steam library?
Currently, my Steam library is sitting at come on, 1310.
Okay.
It's not too.
Okay.
I don't know if 1310 is too bad. It's.
I don't know
over
how many games
1,000.
are on Steam now that I think about it.
But I mean, that's also excluding other platforms because you got to keep in mind, I also work on Lutris.
Right.
I also,
You have 1G as well,
general, I do Lutris stuff. I'm friends with a lot of people from the other launchers and stuff like Heroic and whatnot, and I do test those as well. And therefore I have games on other platforms as well. Like I might get the direct version for an EA game or a Uplay game or anything like that. So my Steam library, it's like I have my Steam library and then I have like whatever other major company is out there. I have a list of games on there, and then I have duplicates. It's like, oh, it works on Heroic, or it works on Steam. Does it work on Heroic? Now I get to go figure out why. Another copy of the game.
Oh god, that sounds like a pain.
Yeah. So I will say thank you very much to my patrons because you guys help a lot with that. Like that's if I need to test a new game or if I need to test hardware for a game, that's where the Patreon comes in.
Right.
So that's been super, super helpful.
Yeah, I bet it is because I'm sure you just working at Red Hat doesn't pay nothing. I'm sure you get a reasonable amount of money from that, but having extra money to do this is I'm sure great.
Yeah. It definitely it's motivating.
Yes.
it's motivating. Not only that, but just being, for me, it's weird. Like I have just like a handful of games that I'll play on a regular basis. But for me, being able to figure out getting a game working on Linux has been like kind of a thing for me. It's like working on a puzzle. Once you get it together, you're like, oh, great, it's done. That's awesome. I feel really good about completing it and figuring things out. But now I have to move on to the next project. And like for me, it's like once something is done, I'm immediately looking for the next thing. Which it's another blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because I get to fix game. It's a curse because I get to spend more money on games.
I'm sure the Steam sales they're either great for you or you look at the list and it's like everything on here I've already got.
Yeah. Oh yeah, dude. I've been subscribed to Humble Bundle for like I don't know, like 5 years now, something like that. And now I get every other time there's something that paying a friend, hey, do you got this game? Or hey, do you have this game? And here you go. Here's like 6 codes. Enjoy.
Well, I guess that's nice. Yeah, share the games around.
Yeah. It's
So,
it helps my friends to get games.
Sure,
point.
just help. I'm sure you've given them more games than they know what to do with as well. So.
Oh yeah, I mean it's just whatever pops in. Most of the time, it's games that they already own too.
Yeah,
and then I'll just like pop them in my community chat if I need to.
Oh well, yeah. There's always that as well.
Yeah.
So, when did you start working on Proton GE? Actually, when did Proton first come out? Do you remember what year that was?
I honestly don't remember. It had to be close to around 2018, maybe 2019. I know I was definitely working on it already by 2019. Because that's when I actually started at Red Hat, which is going on like 5 years
August
now.
21st, 2018.
Yeah, called it.
27 tested and certified games at the time. Wow. I forgot how short the list was.
Yeah. And that actually was that was quite a ways after DXVK had already been well on its way, which is kind of funky. Like everybody kind of had a hunch about DXVK. It's like, is this guy just doing this on his own, or is he being contracted for Valve? Like, nobody had a clue, but nobody really bothered to ask.
Mhm.
We were all just like really happy that our games were running on Vulkan on Linux at that time. And it was like, oh, dude, this is awesome. So, and I'm sure he had so many pain points when things didn't work or didn't go right.
Mhm.
And we all understood those pain points. But at the same time, it was just like, man, looking back now at the stuff that he's done is just insane.
If I remember correctly, he started working on DXVK to play Nier. I think that was the
Yep.
story.
Yep.
I always get his story and Joshua Ashton's story mixed up, but I'm pretty sure his story was Nier.
I don't know what Josh's was. I'll have to figure that one out.
I think his was I want to say his was basically a fuck you. Someone told him that he couldn't do it. I think it was getting like DirectX. Didn't he sound like DirectX 10 or something like that? And someone was like,
yeah.
And someone was like, I think the story was someone told him that his idea was a bad idea and there was no way it was going to work, so he just did it, and then it worked.
yeah, that sounds about right. Josh is a good dude though. He's been around for a long time as well, and he's been super helpful. But yeah, I think he started with 10, and then after that he went and did 9 as well, and then just all of that got immersed into DXVK.
So you're saying that you were already working on it when Proton was coming out. So when did you actually get involved with doing wine stuff then, just generally?
Oh, probably about like 2 or 3 years earlier.
Okay.
I would say. Like, so I used to do in my early 20s. I used to do web development, and that's kind of at the same time when I started using Linux more. I had also run private gaming servers, and I had learned a lot of things that way in terms of the Linux environment. And total, I've been using Linux since I was about 14, and I'm going on 40 now, just FYI. But it really started to click around my early to mid 20s, because that's when I first started using Arch, and I used that for like a good solid, I don't know, 5-6 years before I got my job at Red Hat and then switched over to Fedora. But I will say again, Arch is an excellent learning tool. That's literally where I learned half of the stuff that I know today, is because of just using Arch. But yeah, at the same time, I would say maybe like 2015 to 2018 era is when I really was into working on Wine, learning the ins and outs of it, figuring out where components were, how the general structure works. Because when you look at the Wine source code, it's daunting if you have no idea. Yeah, you're like, whoa. And people ask me now all the time, like, how do I get started? Where do I get started? And I'm just like, this is a rough answer, but you're going to want to start learning where the various components are in Wine. And I think the easiest, quickest base that I can give on that is in the source code. The DLLs folder is it's where all the Windows specific DLL code is. And that's where most of the things are that you're going to want to fix. There are other components in other places in the source code, but that's generally where most of the easier fixes go, especially like when you need like a stub or something like that. I would say that would probably be the easiest way to start, is figure out a stub that's currently needed by one of those DLLs in Wine, and either implement the stub or figure out how to fully implement the function that the stub is supposed to introduce. Yeah, it's there are still, even to this day, there are people that know way more than I do in the Wine environment. The Code Weavers guys are freaking wizards. And like I am listed as a Wine staging maintainer, but these days I mainly just check stuff and then ping them and annoy them when I tell them that something broke. Most of these days, if something breaks, I'm just like, yeah, this broke, or you committed this and this broke. I think that's one of the things that I hate doing the most is when I see something that's committed by somebody that I talk to on a regular basis. I'm like, you broke it. Like, nobody wants to hear that because then they're just like, oh shit.
Yeah, try you assume the code you write is good, so having to go back and look at it, like, I know this is supposed to work. Like, why? Like, what is wrong here?
Yeah, I think I probably have I think for the longest time I swear ZF hated me, like Zebediah Figuera. Awesome person, but man, I probably swear I pinged them on a daily basis way early when I was working on stuff. Not nearly as much now. It's been a lot easier since most of the things, like since we rebased, it's been a lot easier because now we're not having to deal with rebasing staging again on a weekly basis. I think these days the person I probably ping the most now is Paul Goffman. He does a lot of the anti-cheat stuff these days. Well, not so much anti-cheat. That was Derek, like super early in the day. But Paul does a lot of the deeper stuff. He's also pretty good at getting launchers fixed. I think he helped with the Final Fantasy 14 stuff. I don't remember. As far as the launcher goes,
the new launcher.
Yeah.
That
was broken forever.
Yeah, it was. It's the reason I started using another launcher. Yeah.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that one.
Yeah.
Like they don't.
No, there's not. It works great. Yeah, it works great.
Yeah.
Square Enix may not be happy about other launchers existing, but hey, that's a Square Enix problem.
Yeah, they should have thought about that when they decided to make the games. Is it Steam Deck verified now? I think it is.
Actually,
FFXIV?
I have no idea. FF14 Steam Deck verified. I assume there's a list somewhere. Steam it's not taking me on anything useful. I assume it is, but I'm not certain. Just use the XIV launcher. It works better. So when you first started getting involved with Wine, what was the state of Windows compatibility back then? Obviously, things like DXVK didn't exist. So...
it was hot garbage.
Yeah, I was gonna
just straight up. I mean, you got to understand when I started using it, DXVK and F-Audio both did not exist. We had to rely on OpenGL and whatever worked in OpenGL and whatever Mesa drivers or NVIDIA drivers worked in OpenGL. Like I remember I had wanted to play Warframe.
Right.
And Warframe worked on NVIDIA, but on AMD it had some black textures problems. So for the longest time I was using an NVIDIA card for it. And then I switched to AMD, and the first thing that I realized was, okay, Warframe is working, or I think it was the other way around. As AMD, they had a problem with AMD and it worked on NVIDIA. And I switched to NVIDIA, and then I went to go play Elder Scrolls Online, and it had NVIDIA OpenGL had a problem with it had the same problem that AMD had with various black textures in OpenGL. And I'm like, shit, I just switched. Like, now I can play the other game, but not the original game I wanted to play.
Stick them both in the computer. Switch GPUs.
It was like that with like every other game that I would try. There were so many, even like native OpenGL games. Like Rage was another one.
I've not heard that name in a while.
Yeah. What was it? Wolfenstein. The Wolfenstein, the Old Blood and the New Order. Both of those were those are OpenGL games, and those had problems. And I remember opening tickets for those. The original Divinity Original Sin 1, another native Linux release with an OpenGL version. Well, actually, I don't know if it was native Linux, but I know it had an OpenGL version. But again, like all of these games had various problems that they needed.
It did have an original native release.
Yeah. Another one, Dying Light. Dying Light has it worked on Ubuntu, but I don't know if it still has this problem to this day, but it needed a PCIe utils symlink for Fedora. It needed some other stuff done in Arch. I don't know if that's still a problem or not.
Yep.
I opened a bug for the PCI utils issue with Fedora, and I will just say I had an argument with that for a while, and I don't know if it's still a problem or not. I just, at that point, that was one example of what kind of drove me to start working on Nobara, of several. But don't get me wrong, they have Fedora, they have really great devs, they have some really nice people over there. I've had my qualms with them, but I also know some really good, solid people over there. So it's not everybody is like that.
Yeah. Before we get into Nobara, so before DXVK was a thing, if a game didn't support OpenGL, was there just no luck getting it running?
No, it was you had to open a bug directly with Wine, because you got to understand, if it doesn't run OpenGL natively, like a lot of the games that I just listed they had native OpenGL renderers.
Right.
If it didn't work natively with OpenGL, then it had to render DirectX to OpenGL, and at that point, it was rendering DirectX 9, 10, and 11 to OpenGL instead of DXVK, and it still does that to this day. If you don't use DXVK, that's what it attempts to do. But these days, DXVK it's basically the answer for everything. I think with their rendition of VKD3D, they're trying to make that the new back end. I do not know the progress of that. I haven't kept up with it at all. I specifically just keep working on the VKD3D Proton fork and DXVK.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so Nobara, I only recall hearing about it relatively recently, but when did you actually start the project?
That actually, I started that back in around the time Fedora 35 released, which is maybe 2 years ago.
Okay,
maybe?
so
Question mark?
Then my timeline is about right. Then I thought maybe it'd been around for longer. I just didn't know about it.
No. It was I think it was either shortly before or shortly after. I think Garuda.
Oh,
if I'm
I didn't realize that was that young. Okay, I thought that had been around for longer.
Garuda's a little bit older than Nobara, just a hair, I believe.
Okay, that's news to me. Okay, so,
but it didn't really start getting Nobara didn't start really getting popular until around like 36.
Okay.
Well, end of 36, beginning of 37.
Okay, so why did Nobara? Why'd you make Nobara? Like, what was it about Fedora that wasn't up to the level you needed to be for your use case?
Well, a couple of things. One was I needed something that both myself and my dad could use.
Okay.
Because my dad, I got him started using Linux. I switched him over. This happened one day after he had a Windows blue screen that made all of his USB devices stop working. And I spent an entire weekend over there trying to fix it.
Did you fix it?
And yeah, we got it fixed. And then after that, I switched him to Linux. And we started with Arch, and then we moved him to Fedora once I got going with Fedora.
Wait, you started him with Arch?
Well, it was at that time. It was not Arch. It was what was the name of it? It doesn't exist anymore. It's basically Arch with an installer before Endeavor existed.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
But anyway, we started with that, and obviously, the problem with Arch is every once in a while you'll get something funky that happens, and then it too will kind of screw up the system. And the fact of the matter is, I don't live in the same state with them anymore, so I can't drive over for a weekend and fix the stuff like I used to. And that's another reason that we had to move over to Fedora. The problems that I had with Fedora were basically just gaming stuff here and there, like Mesa not being up to date, or needing an updated version of GameScope, or needing patches for RADV in Mesa, or just various little things here and there, which is also why there's now like a massive list of the changes that Nobara puts in, because all that stuff added up over time. And at first, a lot of people they may argue, oh well, Nobara is just Fedora with a couple of patches thrown in or a couple of things here and there. Like, you don't understand. There's like a massive list of changes that we've done, and when you add all of those things up, and you take your basic Fedora installation, you go and implement those one by one by one by one, like that shit adds up over time. You don't want to spend a day or 2 days getting your Fedora system back to what it was. And, you know, if you just have 1 or 2 minor changes that you do on Fedora, that's fine. Just go ahead and do Fedora. But for me, that's not what happened. And for me to have my daily driver like that and have multiple systems that I need to do that on, that's where it stemmed from. And I was just like, okay, let's just go ahead and do this, get it done, get something that I can easily pop in on any system or that my dad can use, and I can remote in. I know where to look for changes, where to look for things that I need to fix or resolve or things that might be outdated, and boom, immediately be able to resolve them. That's where it stemmed from. And I was just like, once I started using it myself and got comfortable with it, I was like, you know, there's some other people that I know that would probably be probably like this. So I put it out there. And I was like, you know, still to this day, the bottom line is I make it for myself and my dad.
Right.
You may love it. You may hate it. You might have problems with it. I can't please I can't please everyone. I don't care to please everyone. If you have a problem with it, that's your problem. If you come in my Discord and you ask me, then sure. If you're polite about it, I'm going to be polite back, and I'm going to try and help you. Like, that's generally my take. But I'm sure a lot of communities have had the specific people that come in that either seem or act entitled or demand things, or they just come in and they're immediately like, oh, this distro shit. And I'm like, oh, well, you're shit. Goodbye. Like, I'll dish it. You want to dish it? I'll dish it right back. Like, there's two sides to everything, and that's just the way I am.
Right.
You know, I'm not going to sugarcoat it and I can't be nice all the time. I'd go insane.
It sounds like you got a lot of things going on to be nice all the time. It's like, hey, you know, I could sit here, give you like a big long paragraph, be super businessy with you, or I could be like, no, go away. Like, you know, you're doing like stuff with Wine, you're doing stuff with Proton, you work at Red Hat, you got Nobara, like that, you know, a lot of things. Like,
yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, if you're nice, if it's just a general question, I don't care. I will give you an answer if I can. If I don't have the answer, sure, maybe somebody in our community has it. That'd be great if somebody can help them. But if I can help, I will. But man, I have in the rules in my Discord that please don't ping me. I'm not your personal tech support butler. I'll help if I can, if I'm there, but I get pings I used to get pings nonstop. I still get pings every once in a while. And that's also another thing. I used to, in my free time, I would live stream on Twitch just because I was, bored playing video games at that point.
I'm sure you got questions. You're like, hey, how do I fix this?
Oh, they would pop into my Twitch chat all the time, just nonstop asking me, hey, can you fix this game? Hey, can you fix that game? Hey, I can't get this to work. Hey, I can't get that worked. I'm like, bro, I'm just trying to relax. Like, let me play my video games. But that's just kind of where that stems from. I don't mind helping people, but man, and especially now these days, because all my stuff has been out there for a long time now. Whereas before, it was just a small circle that was just constantly getting. Now I have those rules in place, and it helps out quite a bit. Even with the amount of attention that I do end up getting, it's still helpful for people to know now. Hey, I'm busy.
Yeah. Well, even from my perspective, I get the occasional person pinging me being like, hey, how do I do this thing and this thing? Like, do I have a video on it? If I do, go watch the video. If I don't, like, I don't know. I have no idea. I've got other things to worry about. But you being in this position where you're actually, like, making a project, I'm sure you get a lot more than I would ever possibly get on this.
I've literally used "Let me Google that for you" links.
Oh, that's all. Yeah, I love when people ask you a question and you just type the question into Google. It's like, did you I'm fine to give you some advice if something isn't clear, but when someone puts in absolutely zero effort in trying to get the answer themselves, like I don't want to help you. Like, I'm sorry, but I don't want to help you.
Yep. My biggest pet peeve in Discord is when people don't read the channel pins. So with Nobara and with Proton and with Wine, we have all dedicated channels for that.
Mhm.
And each one of those, the very first thing it says in the subject in capital letters is read the channel pins before asking questions.
Mhm.
And we have important pins for all of those in every single channel.
Mhm.
And I swear, man, people just come in and immediately, bam, hey, do you know this? Answer this
How many
question.
people
Blah, blah,
ask
blah.
you, how do I install a version of Proton GE?
Like, hey, do you have basic reading comprehension?
Just how many
Like,
people have you had ask you how to install Proton GE?
it used to be a lot. Now, thankfully, thank you to David for Proton Up QT. You are a
Proton Up QT
lifesaver.
is a godsend. I love it so much.
Dude, if I didn't have that tool, I would lose my mind.
I obviously I know how to install Proton GE. I know how to install it myself, but like I really don't want to. And I can just click this, click that, and boom, it's done.
Yeah. That's every time anybody has a question now, I'm just like, just go install Proton Up QT. You'll find it, I'm sure. Type it in any flat pack. I mean, it comes as a flat pack. You can just download it that way, and we ship it in Nobara out of the box. So it's just so much easier.
Anyone who's not using at least that, or there's also Proton Up, which is a completely separate project, which is like a terminal version.
Yeah, I know the dev for that too. I think Proton Up started first,
Yeah.
and then Proton Up QT was made as like a GUI. I don't know if it was made on top of Proton Up or if it was made on its own.
I want to say they're completely separate projects, but I'm not certain on that. Either way, they're great. I love them. I think doesn't Proton Up QT also do like Lucha stuff as well?
Yep.
Yeah.
It does. I know when Proton Up first came out, not QT, a lot of people wanted me to implement it into Proton, and I told them, I was like, look, no, I can't do that because they wanted it as a built-in tool to install Proton, and I'm like, first of all, it doesn't make sense because you would have to clone the Git repo and then run the command from the Git repo to download the release.
Right.
And then you have all these files in the Git repo that are the source code that have absolutely nothing else to do. And they're just taking up disk space. Like, why? That was the major issue. But the other issue is I would also have to maintain that on top of my normal Proton build. And it's like, I can't. I've got enough projects as it is on my own. I don't need to worry. I don't want to worry about managing something else that someone else is working on on top of my version that's in my project as a fork.
Right. Yeah,
or a copy, whatever.
Yeah, I don't I don't even know what was trying to be asked there. That's so weird.
It was way early in Proton too, like the early days of Proton.
Yeah. That makes sense. So, with Nobara, what sort of reception have you had from it? Like, obviously you said you've had a couple of trolls coming through, but like, how many people are in the Discord? How much have you heard people talking about it? Like, sort of just general reception.
It blew up within like 36 to 37.
Okay.
37 was really good. It was rock solid. 36 had some issues that we fixed in 37. It got really, really, really stupidly popular. Like, it blew my mind how popular that it got. But these days it's a little more calm. With 38, it's nicer. I would say that we've cleaned up a lot of stuff with 38. A lot of the repo issue, like most of the repo issues, we fixed in 37, but there were still a couple of lingering things. Like, and we fixed those in 38 now officially. Like, one example is we do snapshots of Fedora's repositories. So rather than providing Fedora's repositories directly, we'll do a snapshot, and we provide those through like Cloudflare, R2.
Oh, okay. So you have like a known consistent packages available.
Exactly.
Right.
And the part of the reason that we do that is because we want to make sure that the packages that we provide that we build in Copper work with those ones that we...
Right. Okay.
Because otherwise what happens is Fedora updates a package and then we have outdated Copper packages.
There is a lot of stuff in Copper that's like that.
Yeah, especially like luckily we don't run into that too often with GNOME, but with KDE packages, those keep getting updated quite a bit. They used to a lot, and we would have to constantly keep rebuilding the KDE stuff, which, you know, that's fine putting those in, but it kind of also is a pain in the butt when people are reporting it every other week.
Right, so it adds a lot of maintenance burden for maybe a very minor change.
Yeah, so what we do instead is we have those snapshots, and we update them once a month.
Okay.
And we'll go and update the whatever Copper packages we need for that snapshot. Now, important things that are outside of the snapshot that we do separate patching on, those are done separately. There's a reason that we have Copper packages for those, or AppStream packages for those. So the stuff that we can't put in Copper, like OBS, like we have our own copy of OBS made from the RPM Fusion build. So RPM Fusion, they have their own stuff that they provide outside of base Fedora. There are modifications, like for example, the OBS Studio package. We have our own patches that we put on top of it. So we can't use the RPM Fusion one because otherwise it wouldn't have our patches or our changes. So we have a copy of that. And we can't put that in Copper because Copper can't provide RPM Fusion stuff. So we have our AppStream repo for that. That is just one example of a couple of packages that we use for RPM Fusion. But again, that stuff has to match the snapshot. So that's why we did that. Another reason for the snapshot is because we have all of those packages in Copper that are supposed to be overrides for the original packages, some that, you know, Fedora might already provide. You'll get conflicts for things like GNOME software or KDE Discover, where they might, before we had a snapshot, they would say, oh, there's an update in Fedora for this package. And then people would be like, why can't we download this update? Well, it's because those software managers, for some reason, are completely ignoring the exclude list that we have or the priority that we have setting that we have for the repository. Well, we fixed that in 38. So I went through and the way that we do the snapshot, we do a clone and then we upload it to R2. So what I did is I went through and I found out I got a name for every single package that we replace. And after the clone, I go and I have a script that just goes and wipes out all of those packages from the Fedora repo. So that way, the only ones that are available are the ones from our Copper.
Right.
So that way, there's no conflict. That way, now GNOME software or KDE Discover won't see the version in Fedora that might say, hey, it's newer than the one that you have in Copper. But even though the Copper priority is higher, it just completely ignores that and says, hey, do you want to download this? The user's like, I can't click it. It won't let me do the thing. So it's fixed now.
Right. That's weird that it was causing a problem in the first place, but I guess I guess having Copper being higher priority just wasn't really a thought initially with them.
Yeah. They don't take into consideration I don't know why. I mean, you would think if you're building something that's meant to use repositories, regardless of which repositories, you would hope that they would include the priority of that repository. But it was a problem regardless. Now it's fixed. Thankfully, that's a recent change. But yeah, I'm just glad that's over with. That was another week and a half of pain.
So specifically with OBS, I use the OBS flat pack. That's just because the Arch package is broken and they for years now have never wanted to actually package it properly. But why if you don't know about the Arch stuff, so for the browser stuff in OBS, it requires CF minimal, and they ship the wrong version, so that breaks OBS, and they just don't want to include a separate package. And it's been like that for years, and all of that functionality just does not work on Arch. So it's Flatpak, or use like Titan's version or someone else's version, but like the one in the core repos just doesn't work. But why do you actually like? What sort of patches do you add onto OBS to justify not using the flatpak?
A couple of things. This is probably going to help the OBS devs out because they, from what I've heard, they complain a lot about Nobara having a custom version. Let's see. So we add a GStreamer plugin, which does the same functionality as the FFmpeg VAPI plugin. It's just VAPI is being routed through GStreamer instead of FFmpeg.
Oh, yeah, I have that plugin installed, yeah.
Okay, so we have that one. I have another patch for here. Let me just bring this up because it'll be easier for me to just.
So I looked through your list here, and I know the WebSocket stuff is out of date because that's actually available in OBS now. Yeah,
I need to update the website. The website is always kind of like the back of it's the afterthought of everything else. All right, where is OBS here? OBS.
Browser. It says patch with browser plugin. I think that's really out of date, actually, unless that's something different.
No. So Fedora's version of OBS does not come with the browser plugin at all.
What?
Yeah, they can't because it's CEF. I believe.
Oh, so it has the exact same problem that Arch has.
Yeah.
Except I'm sure that what's their reasoning for doing so? If you happen to know.
I don't know.
Okay.
Do not know. All I know is that's one of the major problems. The browser plugin is something that you need in OBS.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That is added. We have, let's see, the NDI plugin. We have that built in because I know quite a few people use NDI.
What does that do?
It's a specific type of connector. Actually, I don't remember if it's NDI. I'm thinking of something else. It might not be a type of connector. If I remember right, it's the way to you can share the OBS screen between, or the OBS output between two systems.
This plugin adds simple audio, so video input and output over IP using new text NDI technology.
That's what it is. It's not. I'm thinking of a different type of connector, but that's not related. The NDI plugin allows you to basically run OBS on one computer and then have the output put over the network to another OBS somewhere else.
Oh.
So it's I don't remember how can I describe this? It's more so for easier resource management because you don't necessarily have to encode on the same system. But it is a really useful plugin.
So it's a way to have a capture PC without having a capture card. You just do it over IP.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't personally use it very often. I've used it once or twice for testing because somebody asked for it. That's how I know the basics of what it does.
Right.
But apart from that, I personally don't use it, but it is something that a lot of people do.
Okay.
So we've got that in. We've got the AMF patch, which the author of the AMF patch, he's not maintaining that officially anymore. He's also already upstreamed patches to Mesa to get the VAPI stuff in Mesa performing well, as well as the FFmpeg VAPI in OBS. He's committed stuff to get that fixed up as well. We've had internal discussions about that. The problem with the AMF patch is even though it does work, it requires specific firmware for proprietary firmware from AMD.
Right.
Even the open source version, it'll work one day and be broken the next. It requires the proprietary AMF codec libraries from their drivers instead of Mesa. So that's another problem. Just all these different little stupid proprietary factors that come into play when you use it. So if you're going to use it, you need to know what you're doing. Otherwise, don't bother. Just use VAPI. And at this point, VAPI actually works really, really well for Vega and higher. There are also some tweaks for the Polaris series that I believe he's talked about or mentioned upstreaming, something like that. But it's getting there. So that's one of them. OBS browser, obviously, OBS WebSockets,
Yep.
OBS VK capture, aka game capture for Vulkan.
Okay.
That's another one that doesn't come in by default. It's if you use OBS on Windows, you have your game capture.
Mm.
That's what VK capture is. It
What
does
is
the same thing.
the value of like game capture rather than just doing like window capture? Because I don't.
It's a lot less resource intensive.
Okay.
For sure. Like if you're gonna do game capture, or if you're gonna do gaming and want to capture it and you don't have a capture card, VK capture or game capture is like the way to go.
Mhm.
It's a lot less resource intensive than using a full window capture. So that's another reason we put that there. And these days it also does work on Wayland with NVIDIA and AMD.
Wow.
So
okay.
it used to only work on AMD, but now it works for both, which is awesome. The guy that does that plugin also is the guy that did the AMF encoder and is also doing the VAPI work. So his name is NoRep.
Yep.
Yeah, NoRep's freaking awesome. Let's see. There's some other stuff in here.
I see Pipewire application audio capture, but
yeah, that's a plugin. They've been meaning to. I think that's a pending merge request.
Okay.
And it's been sitting there for a while. And the intention is to get that upstream, but we already have that added in our version as well.
I see this is it's a very active thread, I see.
Let's see. Is there anything else that I'm missing here that I probably can't think of off the top of my head?
Anything that's on this list you haven't mentioned? No, I think that's everything, at least on the list that's on the website.
We have the Twitch integrations working. By default, so by default, those integrations don't work. The interface for them wasn't working on Wayland. There's some workarounds that you can do, but it doesn't work properly. But on X11, they work perfectly fine. And there's some launch options that you can use in Wayland to make them work. It's a bit hacky, but it does work.
Yeah, doesn't it force OBS to run through X Wayland or something like that?
It's something funky like that. But some people like those integrations. So we have those. We managed to get them from the Ubuntu package sources. We do not ship any of the secret stuff related to that in our package source. We strip all of that out before providing the source RPM in respect to the OBS devs. I know they don't want that stuff out there. If you do enough digging, you can get it. That's where we got it. But bottom line, we want to play it safe.
Right.
And if they asked us to remove it, we would gladly remove it. So that is just another one of those advantages, because I know the Flatpak has that functionality too.
Yeah.
And a lot of people
all of their official packages have it. So Flatpak,
Yeah.
Ubuntu, I think that's all the official packages on Linux. I could be missing one. I think those are the main official ones.
Yeah. So I wanted that functionality because I use OBS a lot, and it's nice to have.
Yeah.
Right now, I think the only reason that it doesn't work on Wayland is because of a CEF bug. And
yeah.
So we're kind of waiting on that to get fixed before it works properly in Wayland again.
So you were saying before that the OBS devs don't really like that you have your own custom version of OBS that you ship.
It's mainly just because of the patches that I add, which it's not even really patches. It's mainly just we add extra plugins. I mean, the only other patches that we add are the AMF patch, which is, you might as well just consider that a plugin. And yeah, that's about it. Just the plugins. We don't really add anything like customized or special to the OBS source itself directly. We're not, going in and internally deeply changing anything. And anybody that opens the source RPM can see what we do. So
it's sort of a matter of, if someone's on Nobara and they report a problem, then it's unclear if it's a change that you've made or a change that's from like their repo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, but the same thing could be said for anybody. If you're gonna report it to, if you had a problem with the RPM Fusion version, you would have to report it to RPM Fusion devs. Or if you had a problem with, like, say, the Arch version, you have to report it to the
I've looked at the OBS forums before, and if you look up Arch OBS browser, you will find a ton of people being like, this functionality doesn't work and I'm on Arch, it doesn't work. Like, and everyone's just like, yep, the Arch version is broken. Just we can't do anything about it until the Arch devs decide to fix it.
Yeah. But I mean, like I said, that's something that's, and that's, I understand their point of view. I understand that's why they have their Flatpak. That, you know, they want a way to be able to safely fix bugs and knowingly reproduce bugs, and Flatpak is one of the guaranteed ways to do that for them.
Mm-hmm. So with Nobara, like you've got a bunch of changes on it now, but is there anything like that you still feel like needs to be added, or anything that you're working on right now that you think is like a really big addition? Or is it just a matter of keeping things like up to date as changes come in?
I would say hardware support on the kernel, really.
Mm-hmm.
So like we've got a lot of stuff like custom patches and stuff on the kernel. We've got the TKG Zen patches, but like a lot of people will end up using, I've noticed a lot of people end up using Nobara for like maybe their Asus laptop, or like the Asus ROG Ally, or maybe their Steam Deck. I mean, I use Nobara on my Steam Deck.
Okay.
Or what else? Linux Surface devices, because we have the patches for that in there, or Lenovo laptops, because we have the patches for that in there. You know, a lot of distribution, you know, official distributions don't ship those extra patch sets, but we do. And that's another reason that we also have like the big disclaimer when you go to download, you know, our ISOs. There's a big box that says, hey, here's your user agreement. We're telling you right now, this is a hobby distribution. It's not made by any official company or anything like that. You know, I just out of my spare time because I want my shit to work.
Right. And
that's kind of the same just as a lot of Linux users. So, you know, as long as you're willing to accept that and understand, hey, you know, this isn't meant for production. Don't go expecting to take this to your day-to-day job, and then if something breaks, immediately requesting support. Like that's not going to work.
No, that's fair. That makes a lot of sense. So, well, that, I guess a lot of that is then just making sure that things just keep working as updates come in. Obviously, like, there's going to be other patch sets that need to be added if for some reason you want to go along with that. But you would say that the core changes you want to make are done at this point. It's just adding in little things here and there.
Yeah.
Right.
On a day-to-day basis, I would say regularly we keep... So with our Mesa release, what we do is most distros will just release the latest version of Mesa, right? And we all know that the RADV driver will constantly get updates and tweaks and fixes. And sometimes it's a really good fix that you want right now. And not everybody wants to go and recompile all of Mesa Git just to have that RADV fix. So what we did is we separated Mesa. So the way it's packaged, the package name is Mesa Vulkan drivers in Fedora. Okay, that's the package name. So everything that's prefixed with Mesa dash is part of the general Mesa build. So we took Mesa Vulkan drivers and we separated that into its own package.
Okay.
Well, it's already its own package, but we made its own separate source RPM instead of being part of the main build.
Right.
And then we made Mesa not depend on that for the installation. So you can go, and that way what it allows users to do is upgrade or downgrade Mesa if they need to from major versions and still keep the stability of all their major versions. And then specifically we do regular, like weekly or bi-weekly updates of just Mesa Vulkan drivers.
Right. Okay.
So now they're getting the latest and greatest of those Mesa Vulkan drivers without messing with the rest of Mesa, and remaining, keeping the stability of the rest of Mesa.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah,
it's super helpful. I'm like really glad that I did that early on, because we used to just ship Mesa Git on our ISO out of the box, and we would get a problem like every other week with, hey, it's not working on this system, or hey, it's not working on that VM, or hey, here's XYZ NVIDIA problem of the week. And I'm like, then finally I just said, okay, screw it, let's go and just do this. And it's been way easier since then.
Yeah, it's always a bit rough running, especially like if you are trying to do updates regularly, running Git packages. Like, just even if it's something like, obviously Mesa is a
Oh,
big
yeah.
project, but even if you're running like a Git version of like a window manager, for example, like there are going to be versions that work wonderfully, but if someone commits some little thing, like there's always projects have regressions. That's just a fact of developing code. And at some point you're going to run into a regression that really gets in the way of what you're trying to do, and then you have to go work out what the problem is. And hopefully you know what you're doing and can actually track that down somewhat easily.
That is hands down the blessing and curse of Arch Linux.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not everything in Arch is like by default. They basically they pretty much just ship the latest version.
Yeah.
Rather than Git, but anything from the AOR, you're probably going to end up getting from Git. And even like the major versions, you still run into like regressions like that. That's another reason that people instead might turn to something like Ubuntu, or even for super stability Debian.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's like that's the reason why. I was like, with Fedora is really, really good. That's another reason we use Fedora as a basis, because they are really good at generally ironing out those bugs.
Yeah.
They're not perfect. You're still going to hit problems just like every other distro every once in a while, but they're pretty good with getting new versions, testing them before putting them out. And that's why we use them as a base.
Yeah. Actually, that was one of the things that someone asked me, like, why specifically Fedora is a base, but I guess you just addressed it then. Unless there's anything more you want to add to that?
It was just that, and I am, because I work at Red Hat and I was already using Fedora, that's kind of a given. And because because of that, I'm comfortable with the Fedora build system. Debian, I've used it once or twice in the past for the build system, but I would have to kind of go and relearn a lot in terms of learning that build system to get everything ported. Now, it has crossed my mind. Like, there have been discussions of porting, rebasing on top of Ubuntu in the past.
Okay.
Right now, we're solid. Like, I'm happy with Fedora. Fedora's good. We do have, so there's a dev in my Discord, very young guy, but super, super awesome. His name is Cosmo. Dude he's a 16-year-old from Syria, and he's astounding. The stuff this guy does is insane. So shout out to Cosmo. Thank you so much, dude. He's helped immensely. So he did a branch. He kind of after he still does work with us, but he made Pika OS, which is, he took Ubuntu's base and he has ported a lot of the major Nobara changes over to Ubuntu. So that's what it is. So yeah, not everybody likes the Fedora base, or is comfortable with DNF or RPMs. And so in that case, he was like, hey, I want to try and do this with Pika OS. I was like, dude, go for it. And if push comes to shove, we've already had discussions about, like, if I absolutely wanted or needed to rebase on top of Ubuntu, we would probably just merge Nobara into Pika OS and rename. I would like to keep the Nobara name. At the time we discussed it, he wasn't opposed to it.
Right.
But we don't know. If that ever happens, I just know that it would be not difficult.
There is one thing I'd like to say. His website is way nicer than yours.
Oh yeah.
Yours is just a giant wall of text.
Mine was and like
it does
people rag on me for using freaking WordPress, and I don't care. Here's the thing. Like, I'm not using WordPress's hosting or anything like that. I use my own hosting.
Right.
I've used WordPress for years. I use a very limited set of plugins, because we all know that's where like a shit ton of any kind of vulnerabilities come in for WordPress. So I keep it simple. If it provides what it needs and it does its job and you can use it easily, there's no reason to change it. Now, obviously, other than the fact that it's butt ugly, but we'll just putting that aside. That's why the very first sentence says it's a work in progress. But you can get
your website's just early access, like all of these games that are in early access for 10 years.
Early access for eternity.
Yeah,
No, well, we'll do something about it eventually. And like I've had people in the community that have offered. They'll say, "Hey, you want me to do that?" And that, at some point I will go ahead and give them the yes. But right now, I just need something to be there to give people information.
Right.
So.
It's not a major deal. Like obviously it is fun to it's fun to poke fun at it, but like it does the job. It does whatever it needs to do. Like you have a download link at the top. Like that's all you need. So let's go back in time a little bit. Like you said you've been using Linux for a really long time. So how did you get involved in Linux just in the first place, and what sort of brought you to it?
This is going to be a funny, terrible story.
Okay.
You're these days, even always, your family has ever said, "Hey, don't go talking to strangers and things like that."
Right.
I went into a stranger's house, and okay, so let me start.
Right. Okay.
I was maybe 13, 14 years old.
Okay.
I was riding my bike down the street, and my one of the neighbors on the street had this big pile of junk that they were throwing out. So I, being 13, 14-year-old, I immediately saw some computer stuff in there. So I started digging through their computer stores. Like, oh, what do they have here? Is there anything I can change? At that point, my computer was it was a Pentium 1 75 megahertz computer. And yeah.
I was going to say, do you want to age yourself?
Well, that was the first one that I had of my own. The one before that my family owned was a Wang i386. But I didn't know too much about that one. I didn't really start getting into it until I got the Pentium 1 of my own.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so this neighbor had these computer parts, and I started digging into them, trying to see what I can salvage. And the neighbor came out, and he asked me, he's like, "Hey, do you like computers?" Because he noticed what I was digging in. And I was like, "Yeah, I was just sorry, I didn't mean to bother you. I was just trying to figure out if there was anything that you were throwing out that I might be able to use." And he goes, he's like, "Have you ever heard?" And that's when he popped the question, "Have you ever heard of Linux?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, and he was a younger dude. He was pretty chill. He had a couple people hanging out or whatnot. It wasn't. He seemed like he was safe in my 13-year-old brain for whatever reason. Right. He's like, "Hey, do you want to come see something?" And I was like, "Sure. What's danger? Let's go inside the stranger's house." So I went in there, and he brought me over to his computer, and he showed me his computer that at that point was running. I think it had to be either Debian or Mandrake, one of the two, at the very beginning. But he showed it to me, and of course he had like the Matrix screensaver and stuff on there at the time, and I just thought it was so freaking cool. And I was just like, "Oh, what is this? It's so cool." He showed me all the different customized window management stuff and theming, and what was it called at the time where you could like zoom out the entire desktop into a cube?
This Compass?
It was Fusion something?
It
was really old.
I'm
right. He was showing me that stuff, and I just thought it was so freaking cool. And he's just like, "Yeah, this is Linux. You should check it out." And I think it was Debian, because that's kind of what I remember. That was also the first distro that I like really, really dug into on my own. But at that point, after that I went home, and I was hooked at that point, because at that point I was 13, 14 years old, but I was already making like Alta Vista web pages and stuff like that, and like my own blogs and things like that. All the little 13, 14-year-old nerdy things at that time. And so I remember maybe like, it piqued my interest. I kept using Windows at that point for a little bit longer, but I remember Debian in the back of my head. And then at one point, I remember I had gotten an NVIDIA card, and I decided I was going to install Debian and try to get this NVIDIA card working on Debian at that time. And keep in mind, this was early 2000s, and NVIDIA drivers were shit, let alone trying to get them working on Debian.
Right.
I must have spent like, I don't know, maybe like 2, 3, 4 days on that thing, but I did get it working. I eventually did get it working, and once I got it working, I was like, this is the coolest shit ever. And I was hooked since then. Obviously, after I got it working, the thrill was gone. It was done. I was like, great, this is awesome. I got it working. What do I do now? I can't run any games. Let's reinstall Windows. That was 14-year-old me. But that was my first dash in Linux. A couple of years later, I got some Mandrake Linux discs. I remember I had asked for them for a gift, and I got them, and I dug into Linux a little bit more at the time, but again, it didn't stick. And it really didn't stick until like my early to mid 20s when I started working for doing web design, because at that point I wasn't gaming. I was mainly just doing dev work. And that's how I learned the basic LAMP stack and how I learned PHP and basic HTML and CSS and Java and JavaScript. Well, JavaScript for the web-based stuff. I didn't really get into Java later on until the Twitch stuff, because I started streaming on Twitch and I wanted my own Twitch chat bot.
Okay.
And that was a previous existing bot that I had found that was kind of like rusty. It needed some work, and we started fixing it up. It was me and a couple of guys at that time, but that was all Java. It was all Java based, and that part of the reason that we kept it all Java based is that we wanted it to be cross-platform so that it ran on Linux, and that's kind of what got me to like slowly but surely stick on Linux. And then at that point, I just had a love-hate relationship between Windows and Linux, because I wanted to game, and Windows was hit or miss with the games, and then I also wanted to use Linux for all my dev stuff. And ultimately, I ended up just fully switching, and now I do what I do now, which is get those games running on Linux if I can.
So is that part of the, just throwing yourself headfirst into Linux? Is that, part of the reason why you're
Danger in a stranger's house, throwing myself headfirst into that?
Yeah, I guess that also adds up, doesn't it? But, is that part of the reason why you got interested in trying to get, Wine working better, and now you're doing Proton GE?
Yeah, it's just you dive in head first. The things that I've learned is dive in head first. If you don't immediately make progress, don't just give up. If you're gonna distro hop to find something that you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
But if you find something that you're comfortable with and you hit another problem, at that point I say don't distro hop. Instead, try digging into the problem to figure out what's wrong. Because once you get to that point and you can slowly but surely start figuring out what's wrong on that one distro that you like, you can then later on apply that elsewhere to other components, whether it's on the same distro or on a different distro. And it helps a lot to kind of get comfortable with Linux in general, rather than, I get new people all the time that come in, they're just like, oh, I've tried 4 different distros. I can't get this thing to work. It's like, well, under the hood, they're kind of sort of all the same thing. Maybe you should look under the hood, or at least try. And what's the point if it's already broken? How worse can you make it? Or how much worse can you make it? Especially if you're just going to consider reinstalling anyway. You might as well just try and fix it if you can.
I've never really been one to distro hop. I've used other distros before. When I was studying, I used Ubuntu a bit. I used CentOS a bit. But Arch is the place that I've been. Was there ever a period where you were doing distro hopping, or had you just found places you were comfortable, stuck with that until you found something better, and then
before Arch for sure. Like I said, I had been introduced to Debian. I had used Mandrake. At one point, I had Red Hat disks that I had never really messed with. Ubuntu, I had started using Ubuntu shortly before I got into using Arch. And then once I got into Arch and I learned that, started learning a lot about Arch, that was also the same time that I had started making my Arch install YouTube videos. I had one each year that I would put out.
Wait, do these
and
exist?
They blew up way earlier. They super blew up.
Are they just on the Glorious Eggroll channel, or are they on another channel?
I think they're on there. They're probably in the Linux Guides channel. I haven't uploaded in quite a while.
4 months.
I'm periodic with it.
If
I would love to be consistent, but I'm just so busy, man. Yeah, I can't. That's not something that I can do on my day-to-day basis currently.
Yeah.
I would absolutely love to, and I know people out there still watch my stuff all the time, and they love it when I upload stuff. I just not enough time.
No, I totally get that. So what we have 2016 Arch Linux Network Manager Wi-Fi Setup Guide, 2016 Arch Linux EFI Install Guide Part 1 Preparation Disk Partition. That is a title and a half. 2017 Arch Linux EFI Install Guide. Oh, there's a part 2 of the EFI Install Guide of 2016. Arch Linux How to Install Wine with All Dependencies. These are great titles. I love these titles. The oldest one, 2015. Arch Linux EFI Install Guide Part 1 Preparation Disk Partitioning.
To this day, the network one that's on there.
Yeah.
I still get comments to this day with that network one with people that are like, dude, this fixed my issue. And it's from like 10 years ago. And I'm like, hey, it's kind of crazy how relevant that still is, isn't it? That's nuts.
4 months ago, 7 years later, still useful. 1 year ago. Thanks a lot, sir. Fix my Wi-Fi and XFCE Arch. This 6-year tutorial will help me. Cheers.
Yep. It's still useful. That's why I keep it up there, because it's still useful information. And even to this day, most of the stuff still sticks. And like, I remember when I had first gotten started and I went and posted those guides on the Arch Reddit. And you know how the Arch Reddit goes with pretty much anything that's a guide.
Yep.
It's like, why are you going to post this? It's going to be obsolete in a year. You're not going to keep up with it. And I'm at this point, I'm like, look, you're not wrong, but a lot of the information is still useful.
Yeah.
And it still helps the community out. That's just the Arch Reddit being Arch Reddit.
Yeah. Well, I'm surprised there wasn't like more pushback about like Arch install being added into the Arch ISO, the CLI installer.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see people getting angry about that, but at the same time, it's like it is an amazing learning tool. It's excellent for people to read the documentation, but it's terrible for user adoption.
Well, I think you should go through that manual install process. But
oh yeah, I fully agree.
Like, I don't want, like, I've done it like a bunch of times. I don't want to do it again. Like, I know how to do it.
See, that's the thing, is like you have the people that have never done it and should learn it, and that's what it's great for. But at the same time, you have the people who have used it for years and don't want to go through that process for the 500 millionth time. Yeah, it's
well, I guess that's part of the reason why you made Nobara as well. Like you've made these changes a bunch of times before, so might as well just put them all in one place and just basically like. I've said this about a bunch of distros, but your distro very much so. Your distro is basically a glorified install script in the form of an ISO.
Yeah, pretty much. Like
it just puts, like, you don't have to worry about install. Like someone did ask me, like, why isn't Nobara just an install script? But like, there's no point running all these changes locally when you can just do them all like once and then distribute like that as a complete thing.
Well, not only that, but bug reporting. Like if I made an install script and then it was still, Fedora, people would start opening bugs for Fedora. And Fedora devs would turn around and tell them, oh, you got a third-party package here, or oh, you have a custom this and that here. We can't help you with that. What are they going to do? At that point, they're on Fedora, and the Fedora devs are telling them, hey, that's not our stuff.
I actually didn't know that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so now, I have my Discord. So a lot of people get annoyed with me with not having bug trackers open. Now, for Proton, I don't have bug trackers open for Proton because there are a million repeated questions that just happen on a daily basis that I don't want on that tracker. But for Nobara, I actually have the bug tracker open for the Nobara images, the Nobara ISO images. There's a repo for that, and I do get bugs that are open regularly on that I handle. Anything that's not there, again, we either pin it in Discord, and most of the stuff that's pinned in Discord, I will also make a document for on the web page. That's why we have our document section. So a lot of people may not know that, but if it's pinned in Discord and you don't use Discord, check the documents section of our website because it's likely there.
Well, with Wine GE and Proton GE, I could imagine a lot of people sending you bug reports that should just be upstreamed. Like, they're not problems that you have in your project, it's just a more general Proton or Wine problem.
Well, that's why we have the separate channels in our Discord. Like, I have a Proton Wine Discord.
What I mean is, like, if you have, like, the bug reports open on the repo.
Yeah, well, I mean, luckily, we actually don't get too much of that with the Nobara images repository. So surprisingly, there's not a lot of bugs open on that, thankfully. I do try to handle the ones that I can, and if it's in the wrong place, I will just straight up tell them, hey, this is a problem with XYZ component that isn't part of Nobara, but we thankfully don't get too much of that on the Nobara side. On the Proton side, we get that all the time.
Yeah. That's what I was more concerned about. Like, consider like Proton's a more widespread thing than just Nobara is.
Yeah. With Proton, I used to get that like all the freaking time, and for me, as much as people absolutely hate it, Discord is just easier for me. Like, I'm one guy. I can't track 500,000 bug reports that are open on, you might, if I had those open and somebody had a problem and I got like, say 100 bug reports in a day, their issue would immediately get knocked off the top of the page and I would not see it.
Right.
And I'm pretty much the only person that works mainly on Proton GE for regular maintenance. I do, we do get a lot of people that'll submit fixes for like Proton fixes or for like FSR or specific components or patches, but for keeping everything going on a regular day-to-day basis, it's just me. Like, I can't go through all of that. It's easier for me to see it on Discord.
That makes sense. So you obviously have to like test a lot of games to make sure things are working, but what games are you just finding yourself just regularly playing now? Like, what do you? I know 14. We talked about that a little bit before.
14. Diablo is a big one. Like, people love it or hate it. I played Diablo 3 for God knows how long. I'm not as high level as some people who still played it like nonstop. But I think when I quit, I was like maybe around 500 something Paragon levels. So I had sunk in a massive amount in that game. And by the time, when Diablo 4 came out, I was stoked. I was so happy that game came out. So I jumped into that, got a level 50 something character, beat the campaign. And now I have a level 40 something hardcore character. And I'm slowly but surely working my way through that whenever I have free time. So, that's pretty much it. I used to play a lot of Warframe too. I don't play Warframe too much these days. Mainly, I just pop in if somebody has a problem, check it out. But that used to be a big one on my list. These days, it's mainly just FF14 and Diablo.
That takes up enough time by itself. Just
occasionally, I'll hop into like a single player game just to enjoy the story for a little bit. Like I think one of the other ones that I started playing a while was God of War, the first one. Even though it's been out a while, I still haven't played
the first one or the reboot first one?
The reboot first one.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So that one, another one that I was hooked on for a little while was Horizon Zero Dawn.
Okay.
A lot of the PlayStation titles that have come to PC, like those, I generally get hooked to those pretty quick. So, but on a regular daily basis, pretty much just Diablo or FF14.
Well, actually, we'll talk about this before, but I do want you to bring up like how long you've been playing 14 for, because like way longer than I have.
So I don't know the year.
Okay.
Because it was a long time ago, but I played the FF14 original beta before they redid it as a Realm Reborn. So I played the beta. I wasn't a regular in the original release. I had played the beta, and then I've played, like, officially played since a Realm Reborn released.
Okay. The game was I've seen like videos of like changes over the years, and the game was a very, very different game back then. Things have been very streamlined now.
Yeah, and like even though I didn't like super officially play before A Realm Reborn, I have all of the physical collector's editions, including the original Final Fantasy 14 collector's edition release, and the Realm Reborn release, both of them. So, and I have it's cool. Like I look at it now, and like I have all the little collector stuff from the original release on my account too, and I'm just like, oh yeah, I got this stuff nobody else has.
So
little tweaks.
Was it the like 14 spoke to you, or had you been a big Final Fantasy fan before?
I
that?
have been a big Final Fantasy fan for a long time.
Mhm.
Up until I want to say 12. I think 12 is when I stopped. I played everything up until 12.
Oh.
A
Zodiac Age. Playing through 12 right now.
Yeah, I think that's where I stopped. I played everything else up until then. I owned all of them on Steam, like all of them. Every time there's a new one that comes out, I'm immediately like, give me. But yeah, Final Fantasy 14. It also came in a time where I was kind of burnt out on WoW.
Okay, yep.
I had played WoW for a little while. I played it on and off until all the way up from release through. At least through Warlords of Draenor. About that time is when I stopped.
Jeez.
I used to be a huge MMO fan. Like I played through all of the main stuff on SWTOR. I played all through ESO when that came out. I played both of those since release. Obviously Final Fantasy 14, OG WoW. OG WoW was another one that I had played when I was like 15, 16 years old. I had to be 16 because I remember at that time I had also worked at an internet cafe. Yeah, so I've had my share of RPGs.
I didn't really, I had friends that were like really into WoW that were trying to get me to play it at one point, but by that point I was in high school. I was already burnt out of MMOs because I played RuneScape from 2000 and whatever year the Grand Exchange was at, like 2006, 2007, up until Evolution of Combat. So RuneScape 3, where a bunch of people quit because they were sick of they did not like the direction it was going.
That is one that I never got into. Like
Good.
I don't get me wrong, I've logged in, I've played maybe an hour or two of it.
Sure.
But I never like fully dived into RuneScape. Out of all the old RPGs that are out there, that was one that I never deeply dived into.
Well, RuneScape's a very different kind of MMO to modern games. Where like modern MMOs are all about the end game. RuneScape obviously now has some raids, it has some end game content, but like the entire game is the leveling experience. Like you cannot play RuneScape without the leveling experience.
Yeah.
As much, you know,
you can say that about a lot of MMOs these days now. Like Final Fantasy 14 is a perfect example of that. The leveling experience. Well, okay,
it's more the story experience with 14 rather than
the story experience. Yeah,
leveling is sort of mind numbing.
I would say up until around level 30, yes.
Sure, yeah.
Level 30 is when it really kind of starts taking off. And I also, that's also why I'm really glad that they eventually included Heaven's Ward in the trial.
Now Stormblood with the next patch.
Yeah. I'm really, really happy that they did that because the original game, A Realm Reborn by itself was just not enough to get a good experience.
Yeah. A lot of the jobs just don't really... Summoner right now is probably the only job that feels... Because it doesn't get any more buttons. It just stops with getting more buttons after like 56 or something. They just change what the button looks like. But a lot of the jobs just don't start playing properly until at least level 60 or 70. Like playing a level 50 Sage, for example, like the job just doesn't work. Like you can get... All the content's easy. You can get through it, but it just doesn't... It doesn't flow like it's supposed to, or playing a dancer at that level, or playing a dark knight at that level. Like a lot of these jobs just don't work at level 50.
Yeah, I kind of feel a little bit that way with Samurai. Like I play Samurai currently, and it was such a change for me because I started as Pugilist, and then went Monk, and then went and Pugilist is too much for me. Then I went Ninja, and Ninja was a blast. Ninja was a lot of fun to play. And then I switched from when Stormblood came out. Despite a lot of people not liking Stormblood, I loved Stormblood. I had a lot of fun in it. And when the reason that I switched to Samurai wasn't for the PvE or the raids of the story. It was because Samurai is a blast to play in PvP. And PvP in that game is not as big as other games, but oh man, I had so much fun.
That was when PvP was a disaster. I guess, a lot of the jobs just...
Yeah.
Like, some of the PvP didn't make any sense, but I guess maybe Samurai was good.
At that time was so much fun. Because they have a lot of dashes. Well, I don't know if you would call it a lot, but Samurais have gap closers.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that made it really fun in PvP, is that you could just gap close, and it was, they have that global cooldown, but it wasn't so much of a problem for Samurai as it was for some other classes. With if I did PvP for Ninja, I was getting my ass whooped. But when I switched to Samurai, it's like, swing this way, knock one or two people down, zoom over this way, and knock a couple people down. It was so much easier. It was just a lot of fun. That's what got me hooked on Samurai. I'm still Samurai currently, but I'll probably change when I start really picking up the game.
I don't think I've played Samurai PvP. I've unlocked Samurai. I've played a little bit of it, but right now I'm playing. I'm going through the story as Sage, just through the Endwalker stuff. I've got both Sage and Reaper to 90, so I could play either of them. But when I first started the game, I picked a Gladiator and turns into Paladin. Paladin's great, but I don't know, I know a lot of people can, if you want to see people just whining about stuff, just go to the FF14 forums. They're always complaining about something. But I think all the jobs are fun to play. There's a bunch that I still need to get around to messing with. I need to mess around with Red Mage still. I need to unlock Dragoon. But of the jobs that I have played, which is the majority of them, they're all fun to play in their own way.
Yeah. I think the next class that I'll probably try is Gunslinger. Gunslinger looks pretty cool.
Wait. Do you mean...
Or was it...
Machinist? Gunbreaker?
Yeah, Machinist. Yeah. The one with guns.
Yeah.
This is pretty much the only one with guns.
Well, when Dawn Trail comes out, I don't know. Maybe, we know the new job has a sword, but if it's a pirate, they're probably going to have a gun in their offhand.
No, just reintroduce gun blades. Problem solved. Well, Machinist...
Gunbreaker is a gunblade.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
you're right.
So,
I forgot that the class exists.
So wait,
they've introduced so many classes now.
Yeah, I don't want to be anywhere near that balance team. That sounds like a nightmare.
Well, I mean, that's also probably why the game is very much PvE focused and not PvP focused.
Well, it doesn't have, at least in the PvP, it doesn't have the WoW problem of being geared PvP.
Yeah. And WoW, the other problem with that is WoW has their PvP specific gear, and then they have to balance that out as well.
Yeah.
That's always been a problem.
So how far are you actually, have you played through all the story of 14, or are you still making your way through it?
I'm still making my way through Endwalker right now.
Okay.
Yeah. I had recently finished Shadowbringers, so right. I'm still early on in Endwalker, just kind of making my pace whenever I hop into the game.
No, that's fair. I guess you got a bunch of other things that are more important to be doing than just playing 14.
Love the game to death, but there's just there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Well, actually, I guess one other thing we can bring up is I see on your Twitter you randomly post some anime stuff. I saw that you're caught up on One Piece by the looks of it.
Oh yes.
I'm actually I made the mistake of recently starting to watch it, so I'm 70 episodes in. It's great. It's great.
Oh, good. So you've passed Usopp's story, hopefully.
Yeah, Usopp's story was the first point. It was a little bit rough.
Yeah, I would say out of the entire beginning, Usopp's was the worst. That was the hardest for me to get through with the stupid cat.
I don't know if you're gonna remember this part of it, but I'm up to the island with the two giants that were fighting.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a pretty good storyline. That
Yeah.
the Elbath,
Mm.
Elbath,
Yeah,
Elbath.
yeah, yeah.
I don't
Elbath.
remember if it's. I think it's th.
Yeah, it's Fable
But yeah,
backwards.
yeah. It's a. I didn't even know. I didn't even realize that.
Wait, you didn't?
No, I never thought about that. And you're like, oh, it's Fable backwards. It's like, well, holy shit, you learn something new every day. Yeah, but that was pretty good. I'm trying to remember what comes next. I think
Chopper comes up soon. I've read most.
you haven't gotten to Chopper yet.
So I've read the manga a long time ago. I got up to Whole Cake. So I've read through all this stuff.
Wow!
But
okay.
it was I read when Whole Cake was
up
current content. So I've forgotten everything that's happened.
Well, if you've gotten up to Whole Cake, you're pretty close because Whole Cake came before Wano. There's a whole bunch of stuff that happens in Wano, but
but
Whole Cake came right before that.
Yeah, now I'm just going back and watching it, and watching it is a whole different experience. I know like major story beats, like Ace dies, Skypiea, things like that. I know these big events, but I don't remember any of like the in between stuff.
Are you? So I'm assuming you're watching sub, but
yeah.
If you get bored one day, I would say check out the dub, especially like maybe at least for like the Skypiea arc.
Okay.
Because the voice acting for the dub is great for the English dub, and in particular the Skypiea arc was one of my favorites, and Zoro is really funny in that arc. So Luffy's got his moments where he's making fun of various people, but in general, like I actually had watched the English dub up through through Skypiea at least, and then when the English dub ended, I was like, well, shit, there's no more any more English episodes for me to watch, but I want to keep watching the rest of it, so that's when I switched over to sub. And it's like I don't have any anything against sub. I like subs. Most of the stuff that I watch is in subs, but sometimes like I'm multitasking and it's easier just for me to hear what's going on.
Didn't know that's totally fair. I've picked up enough Japanese being a weeb over the years that I can half pay attention now. It's good. If you ask me to speak any Japanese, I can't do it. But if I'm like passively paying attention to a conversation, like I can understand enough to like, if I've got some like clothes that need to be put away, like I can step away for a moment and still follow along what's going on.
Yeah.
But yeah. At some point in the future, I'll eventually catch up on One Piece, but that's a while away. I did see that you were watching Bocce recently as well.
Yep, I finished Bocce. Bocce was hilarious. It was freaking awesome. That was that was not expected. Like every once in a while, you gotta watch something different. Like, you have your typical Shonen Jump stuff. You have your typical isekai stuff and your typical fantasy stuff, and then every once in a while you just got to watch something different. And Bocce is one of those shows that's just like, oh my God,
that's not normally what you'd go for hilarious.
Then. Yeah. Well, I mean, it all depends on what my mood is.
Sure.
Like I've watched all the typical stuff, and then like, what was the other one? Something is a girl with the redhead. Where it's like this girl that's a tomboy and she has this best friend and she's had a crush on him for forever and she's trying to get him to realize that she's a girl and has that kind of interest in him.
Tomo-chan is a girl.
Yes, yeah, that's it. So that was also a really good one. The guy that she's interested in, that's her best friend, and her other girl best friend, they just hate each other and they just go at each other's throats nonstop. And it's like, bro, you guys are brutal, but it's so funny. It was, oh man, that's one of those other like off-ball ones that I really enjoyed.
I don't know how I haven't watched that because I remember seeing like as the manga was being translated, like it just got posted on Reddit for like years and years. Like I'd seen so much of it already, but somehow the anime slipped by me. I didn't think I'd check it out.
It's worth checking out. I've seen a lot of a lot of the animes that have short runs, I've probably watched.
Right.
And the main reason for that is that exercise bike behind me. That's as soon as I get off of work, I do that for an hour, and it's right in front of the TV. So I'll pop in like 2 or 3 episodes of whatever I'm watching at that time, and a week goes by, I'm done with the season.
Right. Okay. That's a good way to do it. Yeah. If anyone wants to make cardio less boring, just watch something. Cardio, the only reason people don't like cardio is because it's boring. Just, you have a phone. Just put something on your phone.
Yeah, the biggest thing is just to take your mind off of counting down the time.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be out of breath. You're going to be sweating. It's going to suck.
Well,
but if you're not paying attention to that, then time goes by pretty quick.
For me, I've tried to use music. The problem with music is I very quickly realize how long songs are, and then I start counting songs, which gives me the exact same problem. So I need something where it's like, with obviously an anime is going to be like 20-something minutes long, but like that's a bit longer of a time. And also it's hard to work out, especially if you've not seen the episode before, where in the episode you are. When it's songs that you've heard, like, how far in that song you are.
Yeah. And also, the other thing with anime, though, is, like, if you're watching a really good part of the story arc, and, like, the episode, like, say you're on the bike, episode ends, you start the next episode, the time that you need to be on the bike ends, but the episode's still going, and it's, like, at a really intense part, you might be so... I've had times where I'm so tuned into the episode, and then I look at the time on my bike, and I'm like, oh, I was supposed to end 10, 15 minutes ago. Whoops. Oh, well. And at that point, it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's better to just forget that you're actually doing that than constantly keeping tabs on it. It's like, oh, God, can I get off this thing yet?
Well, I guess with that, we're sort of past the 2-hour mark now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, time goes by fast.
That flew by.
So, let the people know where they can find you, where they can find your stuff, whatever you want to direct people to.
Okay. Well, my Discord, if anybody has questions for, like, Nobara or, Proton GE, anything like that, Discord is the easiest spot for me to see that.
Oh, so you manage them both from the same Discord, do you?
Yep. It's all from the same Discord. It's linked on the Nobara webpage, bottom right corner for the Discord. YouTube, even though I'm not active on there, if people do end up commenting on one of my YouTube comments, I see those almost immediately because I always have my email up. But yeah, that's pretty much, if you need to contact me, that's where I am. I will, again, really shout out my Patreon subscribers. I'm not asking for patrons here at all. That's not the point here. My point is to super shout out the patrons that I do have, because you guys are awesome. There have been people on there that have supported me for years now, and I am ever grateful, like never-endingly grateful for those people.
Yeah, there is a lot of generous people in this space. Like, I've had people on mine who've been there for like 3 or 4 years. Like, and I look at on Patreon, you can see like the total of how much they've given. You're like, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You could buy a car with that.
It adds up over time, man. It's really awesome to see people that are just like super helpful and supportive.
Yeah, for sure. So there's nothing else you want to mention? Is that nothing?
That's it. That's all I got, pretty much.
Cool. As for me, the gaming channel is Proton Games. Right now, I'm still playing through Final Fantasy 16. I almost done with this. Probably got like another 3 or 4 streams left. Also, I'm probably done with Portal co-op by the time this comes out. So I have no idea what I'll be playing. Maybe God of War 2. Maybe a Kingdom Hearts. I don't know. Come over to the stream and you'll see what I'm playing. I have no idea. Because this is coming out in like a couple of weeks. Main channel, Brody Robertson, do Linux videos there 6 days a week. There'll be videos there. I don't know. Check them out. Something fun, probably. And if you're listening to the audio version of this, the video version can be found on YouTube at Tech Over Tea. If you're watching the video, you can find the audio pretty much on any audio podcast platform. There is an RSS feed. Put it in your favorite app, and you're good to go. So I'll give you the final word. What do you want to say?
Thank you, everybody that tuned in. Thank you, everybody that's hanging out. Thank you, everybody that watched. Well, that hung out and watched. There's nobody live hanging out, but thank you.
Absolutely. And see you guys later.